Hello, everybody, and welcome to our discussion of Caligula's Horus's 2020 LP, Rise Radiant. We were originally trying to discuss this in anticipation of the release of Charcoal Grace, but that's been out for a bit now. We got a little bit delayed. Anyway, without further ado, let's discuss this focused and potent statement of intent from one of Australia's best progressive metal bands. Stay tuned. So, Isaac, do you know the story of this band's namesake at all?
Is it named after the eponymous person himself?
So Caligula, in case you didn't know, was referred to the Mad Emperor of Rome, deemed so because of his tyrannical and exuberant taxes to cope with his extremely luxurious lifestyle, massive abuse of power towards his subjects, and also, very pertinently, his extreme love towards a particular horse, in Citatus. Now, Caligula ordered the horse to have a marble stable, a jeweled collar, and even its own house built for it. Had he not been assassinated, he actually would have promoted that horse to have a place on the Roman consul. So singer Jim Gray of the band we're talking about today, Caligula's Horus, was taking history when the band formed with him and guitarist Sam Vallon, and they liked the name, so they went with that. So Caligula's Horus released their first record, Moments from Ephemeral City, in 2011. More than 10 years on, released Rise Radiant in the year 2020. One thing that always defines their music to me across their career, and it gets more and more so the closer we get to this record, is just vibrance. Every record I've heard from them just leaps with an explosion of color and energy. It's just, you can't think of this band or their sound without just seeing a friggin' rainbow and a ton of energy. It's just so cool. It's like fireworks when they play their instruments, and it absolutely peaked with the previous record, In Contact, which is to many still their definitive release due to its explosive dynamics, colorful soundscapes, gorgeous melodies, and intricate concept. But now we're talking about Rise Radiant, and this was released in 2020 once again, and the band themselves consider it their most, and I quote from their website, their most potent and focused artistic statement, both in ferocity but also in touching sentiment. I recall hearing this thing right after its release, and I remember just thinking it was a breath of fresh air, because while a lot of their music is undeniably extremely technical, especially Vallon's guitar riffs, like holy hell, those solos too. Rise Radiant is really brief and has an undeniable focus, along with a ton of bright, energetic sound to tie it all together. Can you relate your experience of that as well, Isaac, the first time you heard this thing?
Yeah, no, I was, looking at the cover, if you don't mind me saying, I was expecting to feel something a little more like bluegrassy almost, because at least like what we have with the image, we have there's a moose, or at least a steed with antlers there in the foreground, and then we see in the background a giant, massive mountain there, mountainous region, a river's there, some clouds. So I was expecting, something a little bit more like nature driven or whatnot, or something of bluegrass feels. And instead what I got was a cacophony of different sounds and a mixture of, wow, the lyrics, holy smokes, they're very impressed with the lyrics.
Yeah, these guys have always been lyrically pretty up there. The first one I heard for this band, The Tide, The Thief, and The River's End, had a concept, a story tying it all together. In Contact, the album before this one, actually had, I think it was 4 narratives all tied together throughout the course of the record with recurring themes. So these guys don't mess around with their lyrics. It's interesting because after revisiting it this time and after the pandemic, that put a lot of strain on the band. They couldn't tour behind this thing at all, which is a damn shame, because I used to listen to it again, and it's an absolute blast to listen to. Right from the get-go, it just shoots out the gates with these 2 songs, The Tempest and Slow Violence, and they both have heavy grooves, bright atmospheres, and angelic, massive choruses. Jim Gray's voice is really cool. It's a mix between almost like a Matt Bellamy of Muse and, what's his name? The vocalist from Haken, Ross something. But the cool thing is there's a lot of aggression to this, particularly in the bite of Slow Violence's lyrics are kind of dark. But then by the time you get to the 3rd track, it's just one of my favorite things is right afterwards we see an example of one of the most impressive things to witness from a band of this technicality caliber: restraint. These guys are really good at the quiet, expansive moments that really let the songs breathe, and they just like to paint the soundscape with it. And it's really cool seeing that from 3 tracks in, right after the 1-2 punch of that opening track. And indeed, I think a big thing that defines this record is just, even compared to other ones in their discography, is it's just so bright. It suits the name, Rise Radiant, so well. Even lyrically, it's not really optimistic, I would say. Some tracks are, but it's almost encouraging. Rise Above is a recurring theme for me analyzing the lyrics of this, and it's just fits so well with Jim's voice and for the bright sound, and the aggression makes it really commanding. It's just such a cool mix of sounds.
I wouldn't say I was with the lyrics. I don't think it was. This is what I can extrapolate from it. I kind of heard some themes of maybe questioning God, or there was some biblical themes I was hearing, or at least repeated words that sounded biblical to me. And I was like, okay, is it again, I didn't analyze it fully, but what I could tell is that it seems like they're either criticizing or at least questioning the motives of what speaks biblically.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't think of that because if you look at especially the lyrics to The Ascent, the final track, which I'll get to in a minute, the big 10-minute one, there's some lead the way vibes. There's some, of course, the encouragement. You could almost look at it from kind of a prophetic lens in a way, you know, like a lead the people kind of thing. That's interesting. Slow violence, of course, is a very critical take on religion. Like, it doesn't. If I could run the way your God conceals his gun, like, yeah, you know what I mean. Like, it's pretty heavy-handed, literally. So I can see it. It wouldn't surprise me. As much of a glowing gut punch as this record is, that's how I describe it because it's heavy. It's toward the middle, at least, I start to see some potential cracks showing here. So it's not a perfect record. Tracks like Ocean Rise and Valkyrie, like, as much as I love those tracks and the gigantic hooks they did, they kind of fall into that verse chorus verse structure in the same vein. At the same time, high energy, soaring melodies, it still works, but it feels like the band's taken a step back in terms of technicality. And fair enough. I get the idea the focus of this record was to be really focused and just deliver a lot of like strong tracks. And with those middle tracks, especially Ocean Rise, that massive chorus, absolutely love it. It's like they're condensing their best traits into just bullets of melody and aggression. It's not really new territory for them. It still works really well.
If I can ask you, what did you think of the bass playing?
Ooh, you know what? A lot of this record, to be honest, I heard while driving around, and the speakers in my truck don't exactly have the best low end, but upon listening to this again with my headphones in, it's handled about as well as the guitar riffs, and the guitar riffs are handled very well. It's melodic, it's technical, it's interesting. Like, it's a prog band. If a prog band doesn't have good bass playing, I don't even know what the hell they're trying to do.
Darn straight.
Yeah. How about you on the drumming, Mr. Drummer?
Well, I want to say, if I can, I want to gush about the bass playing because I was like, again, you're right, because it's a prog band. I oftentimes don't hear the bass, and I actually am one of those guys. Call me a prog guy, but I do love hearing the bass be a part of it rather than just backing up. I prefer it to actually be heard and be part of the soundscape rather than backing it up. As for drums, yeah, again, I feel bad. I don't know if I'm a good critic when it comes to drum playing. It was good. I enjoyed it. There was some solid drumming. I was more hypnotized by the bass playing than I was the drumming.
Interesting, because Caligula's Horus in the past particularly, I know the two main band members, and for a long time, I think they're still the only consistent two, were Jim Gray and Sam Fallon, the guitarist. So a lot of the band's focus will be on the vocals and the melodies and the guitars. So that's what I analyze the most, because that's what's the most, obviously to me, the most effort put in. Like, Fallon's solos in this record, on every record they've written, are just outstanding. Like, they're not only technical, but they contain a lot of passion. And Jim Gray's vocals, same thing. The guy's fantastic.
If I can ask you, what did you think of the drumming?
I think for this, and this might have been the record's intention, the band is gelled. Like, I talked about it in a video I did a while back where you can tell when the band hasn't been together very long. And this, you can tell me these guys have been together for 20 years, I'd believe you. Because the way they just work together as a unit, a great example being that main riff of The Tempest, like the whole band just locks into that groove, that technical, crushing, but really melodic and almost symphonic sounding groove. Bass player and drummer hold it down super well so Valen and Gray can go off and do their acrobatics with the melodies. So very solid band overall, and this is them just doing what they do best. Rise Radiant has a bit of a comfort zone element to it. Like, it sounds like the band is just trying to condense and trim the fat of their sound, which is totally fine. That's the kind of record it is. And that makes it, this is actually one of probably the most accessible progressive metal records I've talked about or even thought of in a long time, because it's just so easy to get into. They even save their longer tracks to the very end of the record for the most part. We get Autumn and we get The Ascent. And The Ascent is probably more representation of their discography than most tracks on here, because it's quite long, it's a big journey, and there's a huge build up to the end. And so this is a great record for newcomers because brief, lots of melodies, easy to get into, but then at the very end you get a sample of what you can expect with most of the band's discography.
Would you say this is a record to recommend to people to get into Caligula's Horse?
100%. I think their finest work is probably still In Contact, the one before it, but that would be the next logical step after this one, because this is, even if you had no experience with progressive metal, you would just see this as really complex, really technical alternative rock, and there's nothing wrong with that. The band even called themselves progressive alternative rock, for fuck's sakes.
These labels.
And labels are what they are, and alternative, aside from just saying progressive at this point, alternative is one of the most vague labels you can give anything. Let's be real, like, how can Nirvana be alternative? How can REM be alternative? How is U2 alternative? How is Sonic Youth? Alternative is one of the most vague genre labels ever conceived, but if you kind of listen to a lot of alternative rock, you can see it. It's not a huge stretch. Probably the best way to approach this record is it's not the band's most complex record, but most progressive acts wish they could consolidate their sound this well without really losing much on either sides. I'm sure live, these songs are absolutely awesome, because they're energetic, huge choruses, huge melodies, and just, I'm sure this album kicks an appropriate amount of ass live.
Yeah, no, just hearing the melodies and wanting to hear that live. Good grief, that would sound really nice.
Yeah, but albums like In Contact and Tide Thief and The River's End do flow better as a whole because they have a cohesion, they have a concept. But that also makes this album kind of less albumy, if that makes sense, because those records, you kind of feel like you lose something if you don't enjoy them in one sitting. This one, I feel like you could comfortably listen to 2 or 3 tracks at a time and kind of get the full experience. And that's also a good strength to talk about. That's kind of why my favorite Queensryche album is actually Empire, not Operation Mindcrime, because I feel like Mindcrime, the overarching narrative is a little bit ham-fisted. Let's be real, like it is. There's a guy called Dr. X, for fuck's sakes. But Empire, you can take out of context and just listen to those great tracks, either one by one or just enjoy them as a whole consistent record full of great songs. I really appreciate this style of record. It was wise of the band to do this, because especially bands that have a very impenetrable, hard to approach discography full of really ambitious stuff. This is a good move, and it shows great variety on their part. I have loved Caligula's Horse since I first heard them, and this record does not change any of it.
Yeah, not to go back to what you said before, but that was one of the things that I was like racking my brain around, where it was like, okay, what would I classify this as? Again, not to, label or classify anything, sure. But I just could not, like, at least at this moment in time, I can't think of a solid place to put this of like, is this progressive rock? Is this progressive metal? I don't know, but you know what? That's all right. It's just Caligula's Horse.
Yeah. The only thing I really use genre tags for anyway is to recommend it to people. So if someone were to ask me, hey, what did Caligula's Horse sound like? I would say progressive alternative rock, alternative metal, because I think it tells them to me there's a more, not really conventional, there's a more understandable element to it that's not just straight up metal, because metal can be an intimidating term for people who aren't really familiar with the genre, because I would say this is still on the more accessible, on the sensitive side. Like there are no really harsh vocals on this. Sure, Jim gets pissed at some points in this record, but he's never into Metallica territory or Dave Mustaine territory. He's never really snarling or shouting. But I would sell the fact that the melodies are gorgeous, because this is one great feature of this band is between the guitars and the vocals, they have a lot of killer catchy melodies.
Now that I think about it, the middle section with Ocean Rise and Valkyrie, I think I appreciate that more as if I'm looking as a person coming into this for the first time, hearing this for the first time and being like, oh, so they have something that's a little different than those 2 first hard-hitting songs. I like that. And then at the end, I get like these 2 like longer tracks. So I kind of appreciate, now that you say that, it's like, okay, now I appreciate Ocean Rise and Valkyrie because of that. Because if it's them either experimenting or at least the Calm Before the Storm, where they're just like, all right, let's try something a little different before we go a little longer. Okay, this is the perfect thing for, just as you said, for an entrance album.
But you're absolutely right. Like maybe somebody who's listening to this record who has no experience with progressive metal or longer songs will easily breach the first 2 tracks and then might get a little bit lost with the ones that are over 7 minutes in length. But then, Resonate, Valkyrie, and Ocean Rise are a nice breather that allows them to kind of focus back up for the next 2 tracks. Through repeated listens, you would get used to those longer tracks and see what they have to offer. It just takes time. This is a great record, not just for seasoned prog fans, as a great example of just a band trimming down their sound and not losing anything, but also for people who want to experience the genre and get into the genre. This is a fantastic place to start.
Yeah, of course.
Any further comments?
No, I can't really think of anything else. I think that's it for this one.
That closes our talk on Rise Radiant. Thanks for listening, everybody. Caligula's Horse, great band, released their last album, Charcoal Grace, on January 26th. We'll give it a listen and get back to you, but in the meantime, enjoy the music and keep rocking. Have a good rest of your day.